Tony Stark's arc reactors all look the same to you? I'm sorry, but you're wrong. This video tells the complete story of the MCU's, the Marvel Cinematic Universe's, most iconic technology, the arc reactors. Every version, every upgrade, every critical scene, and its comic book origins. 1. Arc Reactor, the miracle of the cave. Tony Stark is rich, a spoiled company owner.
Take that off, what are you?
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
When the event that will change his life happens, at the very top of the world, he suddenly finds himself in a cave. The problem isn't just the cave, of course. His wounds bring his heart to the point of stopping. And the man who will make Tony Stark into Tony Stark arrives, none other than Dr. Yinsen. He is also a prisoner in this cave. He fits a temporary electromagnetic magnet to Tony Stark's chest. But this device's battery runs out, and Tony's time runs out too. That's when the moment comes. Tony builds a miniature arc reactor from scrap Stark technology parts in the cave. Small, dirty, but according to Yinsen's calculations, it produces 3 gigajoules of energy per second, enough to power a heart for 50 lifetimes. This reactor both powers the electromagnet, keeping the shrapnel away from his heart, and runs the first armor, Mark 1. But the Mark 1 consumes so much power that the reactor will only last 15 minutes. And that scene, etched into all our memories, arrives. Yinsen sacrifices himself to stall the enemies. Tony rushes over, but it's too late. Don't waste it. Don't waste your life, says Yinsen. And these 2 sentences change both Tony Stark and the entire MCU forever. Do you think Tony Stark would have changed anyway without Yinsen? Write it in the comments. How does it go in the comics? Here's a very important truth. The arc reactor concept actually entered the comics after the films. In the original comics, the device on Tony's chest wasn't an arc reactor. It was a chest plate supporting his heartbeat that needed to be charged from an external source. The name arc reactor and the miniature fusion reactor concept were unique to the MCU. The arc reactor name only entered comic book continuity with Invincible Iron Man #3, September 2008. After the film. Looking at the original comic book origins, in the comics, it was Tony himself, not Howard Stark, who invented the arc reactor. And the person beside him when he built the first armor was Nobel Prize-winning physicist Yinsen. So the MCU preserved the spirit of the comics, but rebuilt the technology in a far better and more cinematic way. Arc reactor, homecoming, new beginning. Tony escapes from the cave. He comes home. And he immediately locks himself in his garage, our favorite scene. In his workshop, he builds a far more advanced version of the cave reactor. This reactor is now clean, compact, the iconic glowing blue disc. It fits perfectly on his chest, and it powers the first real Iron Man armors, Mark II and Mark III. I want you to remember this scene. Pepper Potts fits Tony Stark with his new arc reactor. He gives her the old one and says, "Destroy it." But Pepper doesn't throw it away. She frames it, the words she has written on it. Proof that Tony Stark has a heart. What I love about this scene is that they made almost everything, fitting and removing the arc reactor, feel organic and natural. The effortless effects used in Marvel recently simply don't create the kind of excitement we feel in this scene. What do you think about this? Write it in the comments. Let's continue. Then Obadiah Stane steps in. Stane immobilizes Tony with a special sonic device, and he rips out the arc reactor to power the Monger armor. Tony is left on the floor, hands trembling as he reaches for the display case. The original reactor that Pepper framed. Old, weak, but tonight it needs to be enough. He goes into battle with that reactor one last time, and he wins. How does it go in the comics? In the comics, Tony's reactor being targeted by enemies is a recurring theme. Tony Stark acknowledged in the comics that he had discovered more than 10 more efficient methods to power his armor. But he kept using the arc reactor because he believed it would have made his father happy. This detail was never explored in the MCU, and honestly, it's a beautiful character nuance. 3. Arc Reactor, Palladium poison and the ticking clock. The arc reactor is no longer good for Tony Stark. Palladium is slowly eating him away. If he removed the reactor, the shrapnel left from the cave could travel to his heart. If he didn't remove it, the palladium poisoning would destroy him. Tony doesn't tell anyone, Instead, he lives. Wildly. He steps onto a racing track in Monaco, trashes a birthday party in his armor. Then, Nick Fury arrives, and his father's secret message comes into play. Tony analyzes the hidden message in Howard Stark's Expo model. The atomic structure of a new element is hidden within the model. Tony builds a particle accelerator in his garage and synthesizes this element. In the film's novelization, this new element was said to be vibranium, but this later contradicted Captain America, the first Avenger, since vibranium had already existed since the 1940s. In the official MCU, the element's name was never clearly given. It remained an original element. The Palladium goes, the poison clears. A new reactor is fitted. Tony is saved.
Oh, wow, yeah!
How does it go in the comics? In the comics, Tony's self-destruction period was handled in a much heavier and more direct way. The Demon in a Bottle series, in which Tony confronts his alcohol addiction, is considered one of Marvel history's most courageous storylines. The MCU carried this theme symbolically through the Palladium poison, rather than showing it directly. Both paint a portrait of Tony as a man collapsing without asking for help, just in different forms. How realistic do you think Tony's attitude of, "I'm dying, but I won't tell anyone," really is? Write it in the comments. 4. Arc Reactor. Triangular core, new element. New element, new reactor. And a visual change too. This reactor's core is triangular in form. We first see it in the Mark 6 armor. In the Avengers, another dimension of the reactor is revealed. Loki comes to Stark Tower and presses his scepter to Tony's chest. The scepter that controls everyone else doesn't work on Tony. Why? Tony's personal arc reactor blocks Loki's mind control, because the scepter normally uses this effect to control others' minds, but the reactor blocks that effect. Then Tony jumps. In free fall, the armor activates. I love this scene so much. How does it go in the comics? The Arc Reactor name and concept were added to the comics inspired by the films. First used in the Invincible Iron Man series, Matt Fraction, 2008. In this series, Stark's Arc Reactor technology becomes a global-scale threat. Obadiah Stane's son, Ezekiel Stane, emerges as the architect of arc reactor attacks worldwide. So father and son Stane are both, in film and comics, the greatest enemies of the arc reactor. 5. Arc Reactor. Iron Man 3 and the Farewell. Tony has changed. He can't sleep. He experiences panic attacks. He keeps building new armors, up to 42. The armor is no longer a power source. It's a security blanket. Throughout the film, there's a story revolving around the Extremis virus. Tony examines this technology and ultimately uses it to save Pepper. And that critical final decision arrives. At the end of Iron Man 3, Tony undergoes an operation to remove what's left from the cave. He no longer needs the arc reactor. How does it go in the comics? In the Extremis comic, Iron Man Volume 4, number 1-6, Warren Ellis, Tony injects the Extremis virus into his own body. This virus rewrites his biology and provides integration with his armor at the nervous system level. The arc reactor is no longer just a disc on his chest. It's a system truly fused with Tony's body. The MCU has traces of Extremis, but this level of biological integration was never shown. And that's a truly significant difference. The comics Tony evolves into a character who questions the question, human or machine, far more deeply. 6. Arc Reactor. Nanotech Heart. The new Arc Reactor in Infinity War is no longer medically necessary. Instead, it functions as a hub storing and deploying the nanobots of the Mark 5 armor. When commanded, the nanobots spread across his body and form the armor within seconds. The technology is now on an entirely different level. On Titan, Thanos stabs Tony. The nanobots try to close the wound. Tony gives everything, literally. He bleeds, he struggles, and he loses. In Avengers Endgame, Tony is retired. He has a daughter. He has a real life. Steve Rogers comes to the door. Tony says no. But that night, he sits in front of the reactor and thinks. And in the morning, he finds the solution: time travel. Because Tony Stark can't turn his brain off. The gauntlet, I am Iron Man, snap. The nano reactor burns through his entire body in that snapping moment. Tony dies.